The rain poured over the stone courtyard as Marcus glared at Thomas, tension thick between them. Eleanor clutched her cloak, watching with wide, fearful eyes, while Victor leaned in the shadows, smirking. Marcus demanded answers, shaking with anger, and Thomas hesitated, glancing at the letter that could ruin everything. Eleanor whispered, urging caution, but Victor's laughter echoed cruelly against the walls. Marcus stepped closer, voice low and threatening, while Thomas's grip tightened. Eleanor trembled beside Marcus, and Victor's gaze never wavered, observing every flicker of fear. The storm raged on, rain soaking their clothes, while each heartbeat seemed louder than the last. Marcus stormed across the wet courtyard as Thomas lowered the letter, shame etched across his face. Eleanor called out, her voice shaking, urging Marcus to calm down. Victor's laughter echoed, cruel and sharp, bouncing off the stone walls. Thomas admitted he had no choice, but Marcus' fists tightened, his jaw locked in anger. Eleanor reached for Marcus, her eyes pleading, while Victor leaned casually, eyes gleaming with menace. The wind whipped through the courtyard, rain plastering their cloaks, and Thomas's guilt seemed almost visible. Every flicker of lightning revealed Victor's smirk, Marcus's tension, Eleanor's worry, and Thomas's fear. Thomas turned to Victor, voice trembling, blaming him for the predicament. Victor smirked, his cold eyes unflinching, claiming he only offered the opportunity. Marcus stepped forward, anger rising, accusing Victor of endangering lives. Eleanor's gaze flickered between Thomas, Marcus, and Victor, heart pounding. Rain hammered the courtyard roof, echoing every shout. Thomas's grip on the letter tightened, guilt shining in his eyes, while Victor's laughter sliced through the storm. Marcus's anger flared, Eleanor's lips quivered, and Victor remained calm, shadows flickering over his face. The storm seemed to pause around them, holding its breath. Marcus clenched his fists, storming toward Victor, while Eleanor grabbed his arm, pleading for reason. Thomas fell to his knees, the soaked letters slipping from his trembling hands. Victor tilted his head, amusement in his eyes, taunting both Marcus and Thomas. Eleanor's voice cracked as she begged for peace, and Marcus's jaw tightened, muscles straining. Thomas whispered an apology, barely audible over the pounding rain. Victor laughed, shadows dancing across his face, seeming to relish the chaos. The courtyard glistened under torrential downpour, lightning illuminating every tense expression. Eleanor's hands trembled as she held Marcus back, the storm echoing their inner turmoil. Suddenly, lightning struck nearby, startling Marcus, Thomas, Eleanor, and Victor, and the roar of thunder shook the courtyard. Eleanor screamed, clinging to Marcus as the wind whipped through the stone walls. Thomas shivered, the letter soaked beyond recognition, guilt etched on his face. Victor stood unmoved, his eyes glinting, seemingly in control of the chaos. Marcus's anger faltered as fear flickered in his gaze, and Eleanor's pleading voice cut through the storm. Thomas raised his head, voice breaking as he admitted his mistake. Victor's smirk widened, relishing the tension, while rain battered their clothes and the courtyard shimmered with storm-soaked reflections. Victor paced the candlelit hall, his smirk widening as Marcus clenched his fists and glared at him. Eleanor stepped cautiously forward, voice trembling as she begged Marcus to control his anger. Thomas shuffled behind, letter crumpled in hand, eyes darting between Victor and Marcus. The tension was suffocating as Victor whispered threats of exposure, while Eleanor pleaded for peace. Marcus growled, refusing to back down, and Thomas muttered apologies under his breath. Shadows danced along the stone walls, flickering across Victor's calculating expression, Eleanor's frightened eyes, and Marcus's rigid jaw. A single torch flickered dangerously, illuminating the damp floor and heightening the charged atmosphere. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters, as Marcus glared at Victor. Eleanor clutched her cloak, moving closer to Marcus, while Thomas sank into a corner, guilt evident in his posture. Victor's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement, his voice cutting through the storm. "Do you truly believe loyalty protects you?" he asked, and Marcus' jaw tightened. Eleanor gasped as the wind slammed the doors, throwing shadows across the hall. Thomas whispered a desperate plea, and Marcus turned sharply, fists still raised. Victor's laughter echoed as the storm intensified, lightning flashing through the windows, illuminating their tense, strained faces. Marcus advanced toward Victor, every step echoing off the stone walls. Eleanor's voice trembled as she shouted, warning him to stay calm. Thomas covered his eyes, heart pounding, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down. Victor tilted his head, amusement flickering across his face, as if challenging Marcus to act. The flickering torchlight cast dancing shadows on Eleanor's anxious features and Thomas's shaking frame. Marcus's fists flexed, muscles taut, while Victor's smirk remained unwavering. Eleanor's words barely reached Marcus over the pounding storm outside, but they were enough to pause his next move. Thunder boomed as Marcus paused, glancing at Eleanor's frightened face. Victor leaned against the wall, voice calm but mocking, daring Marcus to make a move. Thomas sank lower, crumpled letter clutched to his chest, eyes wide with fear. Eleanor reached out, grabbing Marcus's arm, whispering that restraint might save them all. Marcus's breathing quickened, conflicted between anger and caution. Victor's shadow stretched across the hall, seeming to mock their fear. Lightning illuminated the wet stones, glinting off armor and coats, casting a cinematic glow over their tense standoff. Suddenly, the hall door burst open, wind and rain flooding the room. Marcus stumbled forward, shielding Eleanor as Thomas scrambled back. Victor's eyes widened in surprise but quickly narrowed, regaining composure. Eleanor clutched Marcus tightly, whispering for him to stay calm. Thomas's hands shook as he dropped the letter into the wet floor. Lightning flashed, revealing Victor's cold smirk and Marcus's strained, angry expression. The storm outside roared like an angry beast, echoing the turmoil within. Eleanor's voice trembled, warning that their choices now determined life or death. The storm raged outside, rattling the ancient hall as Marcus tightened his grip on Eleanor's hand. Victor stepped forward, his smirk replaced by a calculated glare, eyes scanning every corner. Thomas hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear, the crumpled letter trembling in his grasp. Eleanor whispered urgently, urging Marcus to stay calm and think strategically. Victor's voice cut through the chaos, taunting them with their weaknesses. Marcus clenched his jaw, muscles coiling as he weighed the next move. Lightning illuminated the hall, flickering across Victor's sharp features, Eleanor's anxious expression, and Thomas's pale, guilt-stricken face. Shadows danced across wet stone walls, echoing their tense standoff. Victor's laugh echoed through the hall, bouncing off wet stones as Marcus' patience thinned. Eleanor's voice rose in a plea for reason, but Victor cut her off with a mocking bow. Thomas shrank back, heart racing, unable to reconcile loyalty with fear. Marcus stepped closer, protective and furious, while Eleanor clung to him. Victor's eyes gleamed with anticipation, sensing their hesitation. The storm outside intensified, thunder shaking the walls, rain seeping through the cracks. Every glance between Marcus and Victor carried the weight of impending conflict, while Eleanor's trembling whispered warnings, and Thomas muttered silent apologies. Marcus lunged toward Victor, anger blazing, while Eleanor shouted for him to stop. Thomas stumbled backward, letters slipping from his grasp into a puddle. Victor twisted gracefully, dodging Marcus' strike, eyes glittering with triumph. Eleanor's hands shook, but she stayed close, holding Marcus's arm. Marcus froze for a moment, staring at Victor's confident stance, then pressed forward again. Thomas muttered a desperate apology, the letters soaked and unreadable. Lightning illuminated the hall, revealing every strained muscle and terrified expression as thunder rolled through the stone corridors. Eleanor's voice cracked as she shouted, urging Marcus to pause. Thomas bent to retrieve the letter, soaked and smeared, guilt etched on his face. Victor's smirk widened as he circled them, calculating every movement. Marcus's fists clenched again, frustration and anger battling for control. Eleanor's grip tightened on his arm, pleading silently for reason. The storm outside reached a peak, rain lashing the windows and wind howling through the hall. Shadows of the flickering torches danced across faces, amplifying fear, determination, and defiance. Every heartbeat echoed in the tension between Victor's cunning and Marcus's protective fury. Suddenly, Victor paused, eyes narrowing as the storm's lightning illuminated a hidden passage. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Eleanor and Thomas, uncertainty flickering across his face. Eleanor whispered urgently, suggesting they use the passage to escape. Thomas nodded silently, wet letter clutched to his chest. Victor's expression hardened, realizing their plan, yet a glimmer of respect passed through his eyes. The hall fell into momentary stillness as the storm's fury continued outside. Marcus led Eleanor and Thomas toward the passage, shadows stretching long behind them, and Victor's smirk lingered, a promise of confrontation yet to come. Marcus, Eleanor, and Thomas crept through the hidden passage, shadows stretching along the stone walls as dripping water echoed in the silence. Marcus's grip on Eleanor's hand was firm, yet cautious, while Thomas held the soaked letter tightly, his heart pounding. Eleanor whispered directions, her eyes darting toward every flicker of light, and Marcus nodded silently, muscles tense and alert. Victor appeared briefly at the passage entrance, his gaze sharp, lips curved in a subtle smirk. The wind howled outside, carrying the storm's fury into the dark corridor. Every step forward seemed heavier, yet hope flickered in Eleanor's determined eyes, and Marcus's protective instincts never wavered. The passage opened into an abandoned courtyard, slick with rain and overgrown with weeds. Marcus led cautiously, scanning every corner while Eleanor's eyes flickered nervously between shadows. Thomas stumbled over uneven stones, cradling the soaked letter, muttering apologies under his breath. Victor emerged silently from the shadows, eyes narrowing as he studied them, lips curling in a sinister smile. Eleanor whispered urgently, urging Marcus to find an exit quickly, while Marcus signaled for quiet. The storm outside raged, rain splashing in puddles, lightning illuminating Victor's menacing posture. Each breath was a countdown, every heartbeat echoing in the cold, empty courtyard. Marcus froze as Victor blocked their path, storm lightning flickering across the courtyard. Eleanor gasped, clutching Marcus's arm, while Thomas dropped the letter again, soaked and wrinkled. Victor's voice was calm but deadly, offering a choice between surrender and facing consequences. Marcus's jaw tightened, resolve hardening as he stepped forward, shielding Eleanor. Eleanor pleaded for mercy, while Thomas whispered apologies. Victor tilted his head, smirk fading into a serious glare, and the tension seemed to vibrate through the storm-soaked stones. Every shadow seemed alive, every flash of lightning highlighting fear, courage, and determination. Eleanor's eyes widened as lightning illuminated an ancient gate partially hidden by vines. Marcus's protective stance remained unwavering, while Thomas scrambled to retrieve the wet letter, fumbling against slick stones. Victor advanced, but hesitation flickered across his face as he studied their resolve. Eleanor whispered urgently, directing Marcus toward the gate. Marcus nodded, gripping her hand tightly and signaling Thomas to follow. Victor's smirk returned briefly, an acknowledgement of their courage, yet the threat still lingered. Thunder boomed, rain pounding the courtyard, and the air was thick with anticipation, fear, and determination. Marcus pushed the gate open, the metal groaning under the storm's pressure. Eleanor followed closely, her hand gripping his tightly, while Thomas struggled to keep pace, soaked letter pressed against his chest. Victor hesitated at the courtyard, eyes narrowing, his smirk fading into a contemplative glare. Eleanor whispered encouragement, Marcus's protective instincts guiding their escape. Thomas stumbled but kept moving, heart pounding, while lightning illuminated Victor's imposing figure in the storm. The trio stepped into the unknown, leaving the haunted courtyard behind, tension lingering in every drop of rain, every shadow cast by the fleeting torchlight. The storm began to ease as Marcus, Eleanor, and Thomas emerged into a moonlit valley, drenched but determined. Marcus scanned the horizon, alert to any sign of Victor, while Eleanor clutched the letter tightly, her eyes reflecting hope. Thomas's legs ached, yet he followed steadily, his resolve matching theirs. Victor lingered at the edge of the valley, watching, calculating, his presence a shadow over their fragile relief. Eleanor whispered plans for shelter and safety, and Marcus nodded silently, protective instincts blending with cautious optimism. The valley stretched before them, illuminated by moonlight and scattered clouds. Marcus gestured toward a distant cabin nestled in a grove of trees. Eleanor's eyes brightened as hope flickered in the moonlight, while Thomas's hands shook slightly from exhaustion. Victor's silhouette remained visible against the fading storm, an ominous reminder of unfinished conflict. Eleanor urged them forward quietly, avoiding unnecessary noise, and Marcus guided the group, every step careful and deliberate. Thomas stumbled but kept pace, still clutching the soaked letter. Victor's gaze followed them, calculating the next move, and the valley seemed to hold its breath under the quieting storm. The cabin loomed ahead, quiet and inviting under the moon's glow. Marcus pushed open the creaking door, motioning Eleanor and Thomas inside. Eleanor set the letter on a wooden table, smoothing its damp edges, while Thomas sank onto a chair, breathing heavily. Victor's shadow appeared briefly at the cabin entrance, lips curled in an unreadable expression before retreating into the darkness. Marcus locked the door, relief mingling with lingering caution. Eleanor spoke softly of strategy. Thomas listened intently, and the storm outside whispered against the cabin walls, fading but persistent. Marcus, Eleanor, and Thomas gathered near the cabin's hearth, warmth spreading slowly. Eleanor unfolded the soaked letter, revealing secrets that would change everything. Marcus's eyes narrowed, absorbing each detail, while Thomas leaned closer, amazed and anxious. Victor's presence outside was no longer visible, but the threat lingered in their minds. Eleanor suggested a plan to use the letter wisely. Marcus agreed with cautious optimism, and Thomas nodded, understanding the importance of the moment. The night quieted, and for the first time, they felt a fragile sense of control and purpose. Morning light crept through the cabin windows, illuminating Marcus, Eleanor, and Thomas as they prepared to leave. Marcus adjusted his coat, eyes alert to the path ahead, while Eleanor tucked the letter safely into her bag. Thomas stretched, feeling renewed strength despite the storm's aftermath. Outside, the valley sparkled under the rising sun, Victor's presence gone, but memory lingering as a cautionary shadow. Eleanor smiled at Marcus, hope and determination in her gaze, and Thomas nodded silently. Together they stepped forward, the storm behind them, ready to face what the new day would bring with courage, unity, and resolve. Marcus, Eleanor, and Thomas walked through the early morning mist, their steps careful over uneven terrain. Marcus scanned the path for danger, while Eleanor kept a hand on the letter, eyes alert yet calm. Thomas spoke softly of the night's revelations, while Marcus nodded, absorbing each word. Eleanor suggested they approach the nearby village cautiously, and Thomas agreed, feeling the weight of responsibility. The valley behind them glimmered in golden light, shadows shrinking as the sun rose. Every movement carried a sense of purpose, every glance forward filled with determination, and the three moved as one. The village appeared ahead, quiet and serene, yet Marcus's eyes detected hints of unease in shuttered windows. Eleanor clutched the letter tightly, whispering plans to Thomas, while Marcus instructed them to move slowly and stay together. Thomas's steps faltered briefly, but he regained composure, scanning the cobblestone streets. Shadows of villagers lingered behind curtains as Marcus signaled to approach cautiously. Eleanor's heart raced, yet she held steady, and the three of them advanced with resolve, knowing the secrets in the letter could change the village's fate. Marcus, Eleanor, and Thomas reached the village square, where an old fountain trickled quietly. Marcus scanned every corner, while Eleanor unfolded the letter to confirm directions. Thomas glanced nervously at the empty streets, sensing unseen eyes watching them. Marcus whispered instructions, and Eleanor nodded, passing subtle gestures to Thomas. Villagers peeked cautiously from doorways, their curiosity restrained by fear. The morning sun highlighted every detail, illuminating cobblestones and worn rooftops. The three pressed forward, each step measured, aware that the final confrontation might be near. Suddenly Victor appeared at the far end of the square, tall and imposing. Marcus tightened his grip on the sword at his side. Eleanor clutched the letter protectively, and Thomas stepped forward cautiously. Victor's eyes scanned the trio, calculating his next move. Marcus signaled Eleanor and Thomas to stay behind, while he stepped forward, challenging Victor silently. The villagers peeked nervously, unsure whether to flee or watch. Eleanor whispered encouragement to Marcus, and Thomas positioned himself ready to support. Every second stretched as tension filled the square, anticipation crackling in the morning air. Victor advanced, slow and deliberate, while Marcus met him step for step, sword raised but calm. Eleanor whispered instructions to Thomas, who nodded and positioned strategically to flank if necessary. The villagers watched in hushed silence, their fear palpable. Marcus and Victor circled each other, exchanging silent words through tension and stance. Eleanor held the letter tightly, aware that its secrets were the key to ending the threat. Thomas's eyes flicked between Marcus and Victor, ready for the moment action might erupt. The square seemed suspended in time, anticipation heavy, the final confrontation imminent. The tension in the village square thickened as Marcus and Victor faced each other, swords glinting in the morning sun. Eleanor whispered urgently to Thomas, reminding him of the plan, while Thomas nodded, eyes sharp and ready. Villagers held their breath, peeking from windows and doorways. Marcus shifted his stance, muscles taut, calculating every movement. Victor's gaze never wavered, dark and menacing, as he stepped closer. Eleanor clutched the letter, heart pounding, while Thomas adjusted his position to flank. The square was silent, except for the wind rustling through the rooftops, every second stretching toward the inevitable clash. Victor lunged forward, and Marcus met him with precision, their swords clashing with a metallic echo. Eleanor's voice rose slightly, urging Thomas to act, and Thomas moved quickly to position behind Victor. The villagers gasped as sparks flew from the blades, Marcus's focus unwavering while Victor's anger flared. Eleanor's hands trembled, clutching the letter tightly, knowing it held the key to ending the conflict. Thomas's movements were calculated and fluid, ready to assist Marcus at any moment. The battle unfolded in slow, intense moments, every swing measured, every glance critical. Victor staggered backward as Marcus found an opening, while Eleanor shouted instructions to Thomas. Thomas moved swiftly, distracting Victor and giving Marcus the upper hand. Villagers watched in awe and fear, unsure whether to intervene. Marcus's strikes were precise and deliberate, his focus unwavering. Eleanor's heart raced, but she stayed steady, ready to step in if necessary. Victor's confidence wavered as Thomas's positioning restricted his movements. The letter in Eleanor's hand seemed to glow with promise, symbolizing hope amid the chaos. Each moment brought the confrontation closer to its decisive turn. And Victor fell to one knee, struggling to regain control, while Marcus lowered his sword cautiously. Eleanor stepped forward, holding the letter like a shield, her voice calm but firm as she addressed Victor. Thomas flanked silently, alert for any sudden movements. Villagers exhaled collectively, the tension in the square slowly dissipating. Marcus kept his focus sharp, never lowering his guard completely. Eleanor's words resonated with authority, revealing the truths in the letter. Victor's expression shifted from anger to hesitation, realizing his defeat was near. The village seemed to breathe, sun rising higher, illuminating the resolution. Victor finally lowered his gaze, defeated, as Marcus and Thomas stood alert but steady. Eleanor unfolded the letter fully, revealing its contents to the villagers. Relief spread slowly across the square, as tension gave way to hope. Marcus nodded to Eleanor, signaling trust and gratitude, while Thomas exhaled, finally allowing himself a small smile. Villagers emerged cautiously, offering tentative smiles and nods. Eleanor held the letter with reverence, knowing it secured the village's future. Marcus, Eleanor, and Thomas exchanged glances of relief, understanding that their journey had reached its meaningful conclusion, and the village would thrive once more.